Ethan Grant sat by the wide glass window of his tall apartment building in New York. The nights were long and cold that December. From above, the city looked peaceful, but inside him there was only silence. Christmas lights hung across the streets far below, but they made him feel even more empty. People smiled, hurried with gifts, laughed on the sidewalks. Ethan saw it all and felt like none of it belonged to him anymore. He was one of the richest men in the city. His company made more money in a week than most people could earn in a lifetime. Newswriters called him a genius businessman, someone others wished to be. Yet behind his fine suits and bright offices, Ethan lived in quiet sadness. His wife Laura had died 2 years before in a car accident. Since then, he had tried to bury his pain in long hours of work, endless meetings, and cold numbers. It was the only way he knew to keep from thinking. But every time he looked at the empty chair across the table, every time he passed by her picture on the piano, the ache returned. His 10-year-old son, Leo, was growing distant. The boy once loved to play with model airplanes and talk about stars, but now he spent most of his days with his tutor or his video games. Ethan tried to speak to him, but the words never came out right. It did not know how to talk about feelings, only about goals and business plans. Leo barely looked up from his screen when Ethan came home. The father always told himself there would be time later. But each day drifted by like cold wind through broken glass. On a cold evening before Christmas, Ethan sat alone in his dining room. The long table was set by the house staff, but the seat across from him was empty once again. The silent glow of the chandelier fell on his plate, untouched. Outside, the sound of caroling drifted faintly through the window. For a moment he closed his eyes and remembered a time when Laura had decorated the house with ribbons. When the smell of cookies filled the air, when laughter and love made the rooms feel alive, how everything was neat, perfect, and lifeless. He got up and walked through the hallway, where paintings and expensive art stood like strangers. His own reflection in the mirror looked older than his years. The holidays used to mean joy. Now they only reminded him of what he had lost. He walked into the study, tried reading business reports, but the numbers blurred. He turned on the television, but every channel showed families sharing dinner. He turned it off again. The silence returned deeper than before. After a while, he put on his coat and stepped outside. The doorman greeted him with a polite smile. Ethan nodded and began walking down the street. The cold air bit his face, yet he kept walking without knowing where he wanted to go. He passed stores with bright windows. Inside, he saw people buying gifts and laughing together. A little boy ran past him, holding his mother's hand, shouting with delight about Santa Claus. The sight made Ethan's chest tighten. He thought of Leo sleeping alone at home, the tree still waiting to be decorated. He stopped at a small park across from a grocery store. The fountain in the center was covered with a layer of ice. The benches were dusted with snow. He sat down and watched people hurry past. For the first time in years, no one recognized him. The world around him was moving, but he felt still. He wondered how a man could have everything and yet feel poorer than anyone else there. When he looked up at the gray sky, he whispered a quiet question to himself. Maybe it was not money he needed, but something simpler, something he no longer knew how to find. A thin sound of laughter caught his ear. Across the street, a small girl was dancing around a woman who looked tired but kind. The woman wore a worn coat and carried a small shopping bag. The little girl tugged her arm, pointing at the grocery store window full of sweets. Ethan watched as the woman checked her wallet carefully before shaking her head with a gentle smile. The girl didn't cry or complain. Instead, she laughed again and hugged her mother's waist. Something about that image stayed with him, could not explain it. In that brief moment, something warm stirred inside his chest. Snow began to fall more thickly, and Ethan stayed there for several minutes, as if afraid to let that picture fade. Around him, the city kept glittering with lights, but for the first time he noticed the small things. The smell of roasted chestnuts from a street cart. The sound of bells in the distance, a mother's soft voice, as she guided her child through the cold. He wondered what it would be like to belong again. He did not yet know that the woman across the street would soon walk into his life and change it forever. But that night, for the first time in a long while, he felt something close to hope. The next morning, the city woke under a heavy gray sky. Snow covered the streets, soft and white, and the noise of cars and voices was muffled. Ethan sat by the window again, his coffee growing cold beside him. He could not stop thinking about the woman and the little girl he had seen in the park the night before. There was something about that image that had stayed in his mind. It was not pity, but something more. Maybe it was the warmth that surrounded them despite the cold. Maybe it was the way the little girl laughed even when there was so little to be happy about. Ethan tried to return to his work. His assistant had sent him a list of tasks, meetings, and reports. He looked at them for a while before closing the laptop. His thoughts wandered back to the grocery store and the small act of kindness he had seen. The way the mother smiled at her daughter had touched him deeply. He had not smiled like that in years. He tried to shake it off by calling a few of his managers, but their voices sounded distant and unimportant. The company would run well enough without him for one morning. He put on his thick coat and scarf and stepped outside once again. The air was sharp and cold, but it cleared his mind. The streets were busier now. Children dragged sleds through the snow, and shopkeepers brushed icy flakes from their doorways. Ethan walked slowly toward the same part of the city where he had seen the mother and child. He told himself he was only taking a walk, but his heart seemed to know where it wanted to go. When he reached the block with the small grocery store, he stopped near the same bench where he had sat the night before. The fountain was frozen, and a few birds hopped around the ice looking for crumbs. He looked across the street, hoping to see the pair again. After a few minutes, he noticed the same woman standing behind the counter of a narrow little diner. The sign above the door was missing a few letters, and the windows were fogged from the warmth inside. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. A small bell rang as he entered. The smell of coffee, pancakes, and fried bacon filled the air. People sat at booths, talking quietly. Behind the counter, the woman was pouring coffee into a cup for a man in a thick coat. Her cheeks were pink from the heat and work. When she turned to greet Ethan, she seemed surprised to see him. For a moment she froze, then gave a polite but cautious smile. Ethan sat down on a stool near the end of the counter. She came over with a notepad in hand and asked what he would like. Her voice was gentle, but tired. He ordered a cup of coffee, though he was not really thirsty. She poured it. He noticed the small rip on her sleeve and the wear on her shoes. She worked quickly and carefully, greeting every customer with the same quiet kindness. He wondered how often people noticed her. When she came back to refill his cup, Ethan spoke softly. He told her that he had seen her and her daughter in the park the night before. She looked surprised again and slightly guarded, as if unsure whether he meant trouble. Ethan quickly added that he had only admired how happy the little girl seemed. Her expression softened a bit then. She said her name was Claire and her daughter's name was Lily. She worked mornings at the diner and evenings cleaning offices. It was not an easy life, but she said she managed because she had to. Ethan listened without interrupting. There was strength in the way she said simple things, as if she refused to be broken by hardship. When she smiled again, it reached her eyes. He told her his name, although she already seemed to recognize him from the newspaper stories about his business. Her eyes widened for a moment, then she gave a small laugh and said she had never served a billionaire before. He smiled back and said maybe it was time for a change. Their conversation stayed light. He asked about the diner and how long she had worked there.
Oh.
Every word she said painted a small picture of a world that was poor in money but rich in spirit. When a new customer came in, she hurried away, leaving Ethan to his thoughts again. He watched her as she worked, the rhythm of her movements calm and steady, and the place felt alive in a way his big house never did. He saw laughter, tired smiles, small acts of kindness between strangers. Something inside him felt restless. When he finished his coffee, he stood to leave but paused. Claire was busy at the register. As he stepped outside, he looked once more through the window and saw her lift Lily into her arms as the next shift began. Ethan walked back toward his apartment, his heart unusually heavy yet oddly alive. He did not know her beyond a few minutes of talk, but something about her lingered. He could still see her smile against the gray winter light. For the first time in a long while, he felt pulled toward something real, something human. The wind grew colder as he walked, but he kept thinking about that small diner and the warmth that waited inside it. Ethan woke up early the next morning, feeling strangely eager for the day. It had been a long time since anything outside his business had taken up space in his thoughts, but now he could not stop thinking about Claire and her little daughter. Something about her quiet strength and calm voice had touched a part of him that had been asleep for years. As he looked out the window, the sky was pale and full of snowlight. He decided that he would go back to the diner, though he told himself it was only for breakfast. When he arrived, the city was still waking up. The sidewalks were dusted with snow, and the smell of baked bread drifted from nearby shops. Inside the diner, the lamps glowed softly. Claire was there again behind the counter, wearing the same worn coat, but smiling as she poured coffee for a young couple. Her daughter sat at the back booth with crayons spread across the table. When she noticed Ethan walking in, surprise crossed her face, but she smiled politely and greeted him. He took the same seat as before. They talked again while she worked. She asked gently if he had enjoyed his coffee the day before, and he told her it was the best coffee he had ever had, which made her laugh. The sound was light and warm. Ethan asked about Lily, and Claire said her daughter was drawing pictures of snowmen and angels. When he looked at the little girl's drawing, she shyly smiled and waved at him, proud to show the picture. He waved back, something he could not remember doing in years. When the breakfast rush came, Claire moved swiftly, filling plates and bringing orders. Ethan watched her and saw how much she gave to every customer, even when they were impatient or rude. He could see how tired she was, yet she never lost her calm smile. After the customers left, she poured him a second cup of coffee and sat down across from him for a short break. Ethan found himself speaking about things he rarely told anyone. He said he was raising a son alone and that it was harder than he ever expected. He said his wife had passed away 2 years ago, and since then, life felt like a long hallway with no doors. Claire listened quietly. She did not offer empty comfort, but nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. Then she told him about her own life, about losing her job during the company layoff last year, about the small apartment she and Lily shared, and how the diner was her main hope to keep them safe and warm through winter. There was no self-pity in her voice, only simple truth. Ethan admired that. Most people he knew complained about minor things, but this woman faced hardship every day and still smiled. When her break ended and she stood to return to work, Ethan felt a sudden urge to help. He did not want to insult her pride with money, but he wanted to make her life better somehow. Later that afternoon, back in his office, he asked one of his managers about the company's charity projects. They often gave donations to schools and hospitals, but rarely connected with individual lives. Ethan thought about how different it might be to help real people directly. He drafted an idea quietly to create a small project that would hire community workers in poor neighborhoods to help families with supplies and education. He needed someone who understood people, not buildings and numbers. Without thinking too long, he thought of Claire. That evening, he went back to the diner once more. City lights burned bright against the snow. Inside, Claire was cleaning the counter. She looked surprised to see him again, and a little nervous, as if unsure what to expect. Ethan smiled and told her he had come to ask for something unusual. He explained about the new project he wanted to start and how he believed she had the heart and experience to help. At first, she laughed softly, thinking he was joking. But when she saw he was serious, her eyes widened with disbelief. She said she had no business skills, only the will to work hard. Ethan told her that was exactly what he needed. He explained that she would be paid fairly, with good hours, and that it would give her time to be with Lily. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly wiped away. She nodded slowly, unsure yet hopeful. She thanked him quietly, her voice trembling. Ethan felt something stirred deep inside him. He realized how long it had been since he had been able to give someone a chance that could change their life. When he left the diner that night, the streets were nearly empty. Snow fell steadily, soft and endless. Could still see Claire standing by the window, holding her daughter's hand and waving goodbye. He turned his collar up against the cold and felt a warmth he had not known in years. He did not yet understand how much his own life was about to change, but he knew that this was the first time in a long while that Christmas might mean something real. The weeks after, Claire accepted the offer passed quietly but steadily. She began working at Ethan's company, not in the grand offices high above the city, but in a small corner of the lower floor that he arranged for her. task was to reach out to families and community groups, to listen to what they needed most and report back so the company could help. She worked with the same care that she had given every customer at the diner. The people in the office noticed her kindness and patience quickly. They said she brought warmth to a place that had always felt too cold. Ethan found reasons to visit her section of the office more often than he needed to. At first he claimed it was to check on the progress of the new project. But as the days passed, he realized that seeing her smile had become the best part of his routine. She did not treat him like a powerful man, but simply like a person. When he spoke about ideas, she listened carefully and spoke with calm honesty, even when she disagreed. He found her openness refreshing. Everyone else in his world measured words carefully around him, but she spoke straight and simple. At home, life began to change in ways he had not expected. Leo was curious about the new employee his father often spoke of. One afternoon, Ethan brought Claire and Lily to the house to show them some of the toy donations the company had planned to send out. As soon as Lily stepped inside, she ran to the giant Christmas tree that stood tall in the living room. She gasped at the lights, and Leo, seeing her excitement, smiled for the first time in weeks. Within an hour, the two children were sitting on the floor, surrounded by wrapping paper and laughter. Claire watched them with gentle eyes, and Ethan felt a strange but welcome warmth spread through the house. The hallways that once echoed with silence now carried small bursts of laughter and running footsteps. When the children begged for hot cocoa, Claire moved easily around the kitchen, finding cups and stirring the milk as if she had always belonged there. The smell of sweet chocolate filled the air, and Ethan stood at the doorway, watching the scene unfold like a memory he never knew he needed. Over the following days, Claire and Ethan began to understand each other more deeply. They would walk through the winter streets discussing ideas for the program. She suggested small, practical ways to help families, such as food drives and study corners for children. Ethan listened and found himself admiring her ability to see truth in simple things. She reminded him that kindness did not need to be grand to matter. Every thoughtful act had its own quiet value. Ethan started leaving work earlier to be home when Leo returned from school, something he had not done in years. They began to talk again, slowly at first, then more openly. Leo told him he liked spending time with Lily. He even helped her build snowmen in the garden. Seeing them together made Ethan realize that love could return to a house that had once been filled with grief. It did not erase the past, but it made the future feel lighter. One evening, after Claire and Lily had left for home, Ethan sat in the living room with Leo. The faint sound of the city outside mixed with the crackle of the fireplace. Leo asked if Claire and Lily would come over for Christmas Day. Ethan paused, surprised by the request. When he asked why, his son answered simply that the house felt right when they were there. Ethan nodded and said he hoped they would agree. The following morning, he spoke to Claire at the office and invited her and Lily to join them for Christmas dinner. She hesitated at first, feeling uncertain about crossing into a world so different from hers. But Ethan assured her that it was not about wealth or class, only about family and friendship. She finally smiled and said she would think about it. In truth, she wanted to say yes, because she had come to care for them both, but something inside her was still cautious. As the days moved closer to Christmas, the bond between them continued to grow. They spent long days organizing the new program, and Ethan found joy in small acts he once overlooked. He noticed every smile that passed between Claire and Leo, every burst of laughter from Lily. His office felt more alive, filled with people who wanted to help. He could see how her influence spread through the company like quiet sunlight. One late afternoon, snow began to fall again over the city. Claire stood by the window in the office, watching as flakes settled on the streets below. Ethan joined her silently. She turned to him and said she had been thinking about something. She spoke of how she once believed her life would never lift beyond struggle, but that now she felt she was standing on a new path. Ethan looked at her and felt the same truth inside himself. He said softly that sometimes two lost people could help each other find a way back to life. That night she walked home with Lily, and the snow crunched under their feet. She thought of Ethan and the warmth of his house. She had not realized it fully yet, but she was no longer carrying her burdens alone. And in his tall glass apartment, Ethan looked out again at the city lights, no longer numb to their beauty. Something had changed within him. The cold inside his heart was melting at last, and this time he knew it was because someone had shown him how to feel again. Christmas Eve arrived with a clear sky and a fresh fall of snow that covered every roof and tree branch. The city glittered in the night like it had been wrapped in silver light. Ethan's home looked different this year. For the first time in many years, it was not quiet and dim. There were garlands around the staircase, bright decorations on the tree, and the smell of baked cookies drifting through the hall. The servants whispered that they had never seen their employer so busy preparing for a holiday. Ethan himself had helped hang ornaments with Leo, and even burned his fingers once trying to adjust the lights, laughing it off instead of shouting for help. That evening, he stood by the door as Claire and Lily arrived. Claire wore a simple blue coat, and her cheeks glowed red from the cold. Lily held a small box wrapped in paper that she clearly had folded herself. When Leo saw them, he ran forward to greet them, taking Lily by the hand and pulling her inside with excitement.
Right.
Claire smiled shyly at Ethan and thanked him for inviting them. He told her that it was already a better Christmas because they were there. She laughed quietly, and for a moment their eyes met with a soft warmth that said more than words could. The evening began with dinner, but no one wanted to sit down right away. The children played near the tree, adding extra ribbons and giggling at how uneven their decorations were. Claire joined them, showing Lily how to hang a final golden bell on the lowest branch. Ethan watched from a few steps away, and he thought about how strange it was that joy could return so suddenly after years of emptiness. He had not believed it possible until that moment. When they finally sat down to eat, he gave a small toast. He said he was thankful for friendship, for family, and for second chances. His voice was calm but filled with meaning. After dinner, they exchanged small gifts. Claire gave Ethan a knitted scarf she had made herself. It was simple and warm, the kind of gift that carried care rather than cost. Ethan wrapped it around his neck and said it was perfect. He gave Lily a small snow globe with a winter village inside. When she shook it, the flakes inside danced, and she clapped in delight. For Claire, he had chosen a leather notebook, saying he hoped she would write her thoughts for the new project there. She smiled, touched by the kindness. As the night went on, the house grew louder with music and laughter. The children played in front of the fire while Claire and Ethan talked quietly near the window. Outside, snowflakes drifted across the city lights. Ethan spoke about how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. He told her that before meeting her, he had forgotten what hope felt like. Claire listened, her eyes gentle and calm. She said that sometimes people are brought together for reasons they cannot see at first. She said that maybe all the pain in their lives had been leading them to this moment where they could help each other heal. When the clock struck midnight, the children ran to the window to watch the snow still falling. Leo said it looked like magic. Claire lifted Lily into her arms, and they all stood together watching the quiet world outside. In that stillness, Ethan understood something new. The simple act he had witnessed weeks ago. When Claire chose cocoa for her daughter instead of something for herself, had changed everything. It had reminded him that love was not about what people lost, but about what they gave, even when they had little. He turned to Claire and thanked her softly. She looked confused at first and asked why he was thanking her. Said she had brought life back into his home, laughter back into his child, and warmth back into his heart. She lowered her head slightly and whispered that he had done the same for her and her daughter. For a moment they stood in silence, and it was as if the world itself paused around them. The glow from the tree lit their faces, while the falling snow outside shimmered in the night. Later they all gathered around the fireplace. The children had grown tired and were curled up under blankets, half asleep. Claire looked at them and then at Ethan. She said she did not know what the future would look like, but she hoped that the feeling they had found together would remain. Ethan nodded, and his answer was quiet but sure. He said that love was not something found overnight, but that hope was a good place to begin. Between them, the fire crackled softly, warming the room with its light. When morning came, the first rays of sunlight touched the snow, turning it pale gold. The city began to stir, but inside the house everything remained peaceful. Ethan opened his eyes and saw Leo sleeping by the tree, with Lily still beside him. Claire had fallen asleep on the couch, her head resting gently against the cushion. He stood there for a long moment, watching them. It felt like the first real Christmas he had known in years. It was not grand or perfect, but it was full of love. That day, the billionaire who once felt lost and alone had found something far greater than wealth. He had found family and that was more than he had ever dreamed of having again.